At the stroke of midnight, in the midst of a dense forest, stood a lonely ranch. The air carried a cold, damp chill, and the shadows of distant mountains stretched across the land, painting a mysterious map on the earth. This ranch belonged to Mark Harper, a widowed rancher whose life was steeped in hard work, resilience, and the silent echoes of memories. Mark's wife had passed away several years ago in a tragic accident, leaving him alone to raise his young daughter while tending to the demanding chores of the ranch. The ranch itself sprawled across a vast stretch of land where horses and cattle grazed peacefully. As evening fell, Mark often sat in the courtyard of the farmhouse, a lantern flickering in his hand, lost in memories. Every corner of the house, every piece of furniture, seemed to whisper the stories of a life he once shared with his late wife. That night, with the moon casting its full silver light over the landscape, Mark sat in his room, reading papers by the soft glow of the lantern. Suddenly, a faint knock echoed at the door. Mark's heart skipped a beat. After years of solitude, even the softest voice could send a shiver down his spine. Standing at the door was a little girl. Her eyes were wide with fear and hesitation, her clothes damp from the rain that had just fallen. Her small voice trembled as she spoke. "Mom, Mom needs help." Mark's heart froze for a moment. He grabbed his lantern and stepped outside. The night air was heavy with the scent of rain and wet earth. Every footstep on the damp ground seemed to echo like a heartbeat. The girl pointed towards the direction of her home, and Mark guided her through the darkness, the lantern casting warm pools of light around them. It became immediately clear to Mark that this was not an ordinary emergency. There was a depth of fear and pain in the girl's eyes that spoke of a serious and possibly life-threatening situation. As they walked, the girl explained in broken sentences that her mother had suddenly fallen ill, and there was no one nearby to help. Without hesitation, Mark lit every lantern on the ranch, illuminating every corner so the darkness would no longer hinder them. By the time they reached the house, the lantern's glow revealed a scene that made Mark's heart tighten. The girl's mother lay on the bed, weak and barely conscious. Mark quickly assessed the situation. He sent word to a nearby pharmacist and began administering basic first aid, drawing on the skills he had learned over the years while running the ranch. The little girl clung to his hand, her trust evident in the way she looked at him. Mark, despite his own fears and exhaustion, felt a surge of responsibility and determination. This night would not break them. It would not be the night when despair won. With the lanterns casting a circle of hope around them, Mark and the girl faced the darkness together. Every sound, the creaking floorboards, the whistle of the wind, the distant howl of a lone wolf, reminded Mark of the fragility of life. Yet, amidst this tension, a quiet resolve settled over him. He would not allow fear to paralyze him. He would do everything in his power to save this woman's life, to protect the innocence of the child who had braved the night to seek help. As he worked, Mark remembered his own daughter and the promise he had made to protect her no matter what. It was that memory, that connection, that gave him the strength to move swiftly and decisively. Every flicker of the lanterns became a symbol of hope, a beacon in the darkness that spoke louder than words ever could. And so, under the cold, watchful gaze of the midnight moon, the night began its long, tense journey, one of courage, compassion, and the quiet heroism that often goes unnoticed but never unremarked in the heart of those who truly care. Mark's hands moved swiftly, yet carefully, as he checked the woman's pulse. The lantern light flickered across her pale face, highlighting the beads of sweat that clung to her forehead. She was burning with fever, her breaths shallow and uneven. Mark's heart sank as he realized how fragile life could be, how quickly the night could turn into a test of courage and endurance. The little girl, Emma, hovered nervously by his side. Her small fingers gripped his sleeve, as though drawing strength from him, as though he were the only anchor in a sea of fear. Will she be okay?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Mark crouched to her level, trying to hide his own worry. "We're going to do everything we can," he assured her. "I promise, Emma, I won't let anything happen to her." Emma nodded, but the fear in her eyes did not completely fade. Mark could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on him, heavier than any load he had ever carried on the ranch. He had faced storms, wild animals, and countless nights alone in the wilderness, but this was different. This was human life in peril, and it was in his hands to save it. He instructed Emma to fetch blankets from the closet. Her small legs carried her across the room quickly, but she returned clutching the blankets with all the care of someone handling treasure. Together, they laid the mother down gently, trying to make her comfortable. Mark's voice remained calm, even soothing, as he guided Emma through small tasks, wetting a cloth in cold water to cool her fevered skin, fanning her lightly to ease her breathing, checking her pulse regularly. Hours passed, and the night seemed to stretch endlessly. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows and sending shadows dancing across the room. Mark's own fatigue began to weigh on him, but he ignored it. He could not rest. Not yet. Not when someone's life depended on his vigilance. Gradually, the woman's breathing steadied, though she remained weak. Mark kept a close watch on her, his mind racing with possibilities and worst-case scenarios. "We need to keep her hydrated," he muttered. "Emma, can you bring me a cup of water?" Emma hesitated only for a moment, then ran to fetch it. Her movements were careful, deliberate, as though she understood the seriousness of the night in ways even her young mind could barely grasp. Mark handed her the cup and guided her to help her mother sip slowly, reassuring her gently as she did so. In these quiet, intense hours, a bond began to form between Mark and Emma. He had never felt this protective of a child outside of his own daughter, yet something about Emma's courage and trust drew him in completely. And Emma, for her part, found in Mark a steady presence, a figure of strength in a night that had felt overwhelmingly dark and frightening. As the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, the woman stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Relief surged through Mark's chest, and he allowed himself a small, weary smile. "You're going to be okay," he said softly. "Just rest." Emma leaned over her mother, brushing her hair back from her face. "See, Mama, he's helping us," she whispered. The woman's eyes, though still weak, held a glimmer of gratitude and recognition. Mark knew that this night would stay with him forever. The fear, the responsibility, the quiet moments of triumph and tenderness, they all etched themselves into his memory. He had come to this night expecting only another long shift on the ranch, another routine task, but life had a way of teaching lessons in courage when least expected. By the time the sun had fully risen, the storm of the night had passed, and the woman's condition had stabilized. Mark helped her sit up, supported by Emma on one side and himself on the other. The warmth of morning sunlight poured through the windows, bathing the room in gold. For the first time that night, Mark allowed himself to relax, to breathe. "Thank you," the woman whispered, her voice weak but sincere. "I don't know what we would have done without you." Mark shook his head, brushing off her gratitude with modesty, though a quiet pride swelled inside him. "You don't have to thank me. We look out for each other. That's what matters." Emma's small hand slipped into his, holding it tightly. "I knew you'd help us," she said simply, her innocence and trust cutting through the remnants of fear that had hung over the room. That morning, as the light of day began to chase away the shadows, Mark felt something he hadn't in years, a sense of connection, of purpose beyond the work of the ranch. Life could be harsh, and nights could be terrifying, but in moments like this, he realized the profound impact of courage, compassion, and human bonds. And though the night had tested him in ways he could not have predicted, it had also reminded him of the resilience of the human spirit, the unspoken promise between those who care for each other, and the quiet heroism that manifests in acts of kindness, even in the darkest hours. Mark glanced at Emma and her mother, the morning sun reflecting in their eyes, and knew that this night, with all its fear and struggle, had changed them all forever. The sun had fully risen, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, and the ranch seemed transformed after the long, tense night. What had begun as a dark, stormy ordeal had given way to a quiet morning, calm yet alive with possibility. Mark Harper stood at the edge of the courtyard, breathing in the crisp morning air. The tension of the night still lingered in his muscles, but his heart carried a sense of accomplishment that no amount of exhaustion could diminish. Inside the house, Emma's mother was resting comfortably in bed, her breathing steady, her face less pallid. Mark had made a habit of checking in frequently, ensuring she remained hydrated, and had even prepared a light breakfast of warm tea and soft bread to help her regain strength. Emma hovered nearby, her eyes bright with relief and gratitude. She had spent the night helping her mother under Mark's guidance, and now, with a glimmer of morning hope, she allowed herself to smile freely. Mark watched them for a moment, a quiet warmth settling in his chest. Despite the hardships he had faced in life, he realized that nights like this were the moments that defined a person. They tested courage, compassion, and the willingness to act selflessly. Emma had been brave beyond her years, and her mother's vulnerability had stirred in him a sense of responsibility that transcended simple duty. "Thank you again," the woman murmured, her voice stronger than it had been the night before. "I can't imagine what would have happened if you hadn't been here." Mark shook his head. "You don't need to thank me. Emma is a brave girl, and she knew something was wrong. You did the right thing by letting her come find help." His eyes softened as he glanced at the little girl. "And she's lucky to have you. The two of you, you'll always have each other." Emma smiled, her small hand brushing against her mother's arm. She turned to Mark, her eyes sparkling with admiration. "I knew you'd help us," she said simply. I just didn't know if anyone else would." Mark's heart tightened. The innocence and trust of a child could cut through even the heaviest burdens. He realized that Emma's faith in him, and in the goodness of others, was both fragile and incredibly powerful. It was a reminder of why he did what he did, why he endured long, lonely nights on the ranch. Life was unpredictable, but moments like this gave it purpose. After breakfast, the mother insisted on speaking privately with Mark. Emma, sensing that she had fulfilled her role for now, stepped outside to play with the animals, her laughter echoing softly across the yard. Inside, Mark and the woman sat together, a tension lingering between gratitude and something deeper, something unspoken. "I want to be honest with you," she began. Her hands, once trembling, now rested steadily in her lap. "After last night, I don't know how to repay you. But more than that, I realize how much Emma needs stability. She needs someone she can trust completely. Someone strong, reliable." Her voice trailed off, searching for the right words. Mark leaned forward slightly, sensing the weight of her meaning. "Emma's needs are clear to me," he said carefully. "And I'll always protect her. But what are you suggesting?" She took a deep breath. "I've been struggling, not just last night, but for a long time. I've had to work constantly, and I can't always be there for her the way she deserves. You've shown her what it means to be safe, cared for, and protected. I trust you, Mark, more than I can put into words. I think, maybe, she could stay here, with you, for a while. Until I can get back on my feet." Mark's mind raced. He had never imagined taking in another child. He had his own daughter to care for in his heart, though she lived far away with relatives. But looking at Emma, he saw not just a scared, exhausted child, but a brave little girl who had trusted him in her darkest hour. And the idea of giving her safety and stability, it stirred something he hadn't felt in years, purpose beyond himself. "I'll do it," he said finally, his voice steady. "Emma can stay here. She'll be safe, and I promise, she'll have someone watching over her every step of the way." The woman's eyes welled with tears. Thank you so much. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You don't need to repay me," Mark replied. "Just knowing she's safe, that's enough." From that moment, life at the ranch began to take on a new rhythm. Emma quickly became part of Mark's routine. Mornings started with feeding the animals, checking fences, and tending the fields. Emma proved to be not just brave but curious and eager to help. She learned quickly, asking questions about every animal and task. Mark found himself patient in ways he hadn't expected, guiding her with care, humor, and sometimes a quiet firmness that earned her respect. Evenings were the most special. After a long day of work, Mark would light the lanterns across the ranch, and the three of them, Mark, Emma, and her recovering mother, would sit together, sharing stories, laughter, and sometimes silence. Those lanterns, which had once been a beacon in the darkest hour, became symbols of warmth, safety, and new beginnings. Over the next few weeks, Mark noticed changes in Emma. The fear in her eyes slowly gave way to trust. She would run to him when excited, seek his advice when uncertain, and even snuggle up beside him when the night felt cold and lonely. For Mark, the bond was strengthening, weaving a tapestry of care, protection, and affection that filled the emptiness he had felt since losing his wife. The woman, now stronger and more rested, began to visit frequently, helping with chores and sharing meals. But Mark noticed that she increasingly relied on him to guide Emma, to provide her with stability and structure. And while it had been her idea for Emma to stay, Mark realized that the child had already found a place in his heart, and in the ranch, where she belonged. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains and the lanterns flickered to life, Emma climbed onto Mark's lap, her small hands gripping his arm. "Thank you, Mark," she whispered. "You saved my mama, and you're like a papa to me now." Mark's chest tightened. Words failed him, but he held her close, feeling a sense of family he hadn't known he could have again. The darkness of the night when she first came to him seemed far away now, replaced by light, hope, and the unspoken promise that no matter what storms came, they would face them together. Life at the ranch had changed forever. It was no longer just Mark's world of labor and solitude. It was now a home filled with trust, bravery, and love, the kind that rises quietly in the hardest hours, only to shine brighter than the sun. And for Mark, the lesson was clear. Sometimes, the most unexpected moments, the knock on a dark door, the cry for help in the night, can lead to the most profound beginnings, changing lives in ways no one could have imagined. Weeks turned into months, and life at the ranch settled into a rhythm that was both comforting and transformative. The once quiet, lonely estate now resonated with the laughter of Emma and the renewed presence of her mother. Mark Harper, who had spent so many years immersed in work and solitude, began to understand the true depth of family, not the one defined by blood alone, but by trust, care, and shared struggles. Emma thrived in this environment. She woke each morning eager to help with the animals, eager to learn from Mark, and eager to embrace the stability she had longed for. Her mother, fully recovered, found strength in knowing her daughter was safe and happy. Yet she continued to respect Mark's quiet authority and steady guidance, understanding that the bond between him and Emma had grown into something essential. One afternoon, while fixing a fence on the outskirts of the ranch, Mark noticed Emma standing a few yards away, holding a small notebook. She ran toward him, eyes bright with excitement. "I wrote something," she said, handing him the pages. "It's about last night, and how you helped us." Mark took the notebook, his fingers brushing hers gently. He read her words, written with childlike honesty and courage. Emma had captured the fear of that night, the helplessness she had felt, and the relief she had known once he had stepped into her world. Her words spoke of heroism, of trust, and of a bond that transcended circumstances. Mark felt a lump in his throat. He had never considered himself a hero. He had only acted out of duty, kindness, and instinct. Yet in Emma's eyes, he was a protector, a guide, a figure who could make darkness retreat. And in that moment, he realized that life's most profound acts often go unnoticed, until they touch the heart of someone who depends on them completely. As the days passed, the mother began working on rebuilding her life. She found employment nearby and slowly regained her independence, confident that Emma was in safe hands. Mark continued to watch over them, but now the relationship was less about emergency response and more about shared life, laughter, and mutual respect. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple, Mark lit the lanterns across the ranch, as he had done that fateful night. Emma ran to him, clutching her mother's hand. "Look, Mark, just like last time," she exclaimed, pointing at the glowing lights. Mark smiled, feeling a warmth that went beyond the lantern's glow. He knelt to their level, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. "The light is always here," he said softly. "It will never go out. Just like our family." The mother, standing beside them, met his gaze. Her eyes conveyed gratitude, trust, and something deeper, the acknowledgement that Mark had become an irreplaceable part of their lives. She nodded silently, and Mark understood perfectly. Words were not needed. The bond formed through shared struggle, courage, and care was stronger than any spoken promise. That night, as Emma fell asleep safely in her room, Mark stayed by the lantern-lit porch, gazing at the stars. He reflected on the journey that had brought them here, the stormy night, the fear, the desperate call for help, and the small acts of courage that had grown into a lasting bond. Life had tested them, but it had also given them clarity. Love, trust, and family could emerge even in the darkest hours. Mark whispered into the night, almost as if speaking to the past and future at once, "No matter what comes, we'll face it together." And in that quiet ranch, under the glow of countless lanterns and the watchful stars above, he knew that the words were true. They had faced darkness and fear, and in return, they had found light, hope, and each other. Months later, Emma's mother approached Mark with a proposal. "Mark," she said, her voice steady and kind. "I think it's time we made this permanent. Emma belongs here, with you." Mark paused, considering the weight of her words. He thought of the nights spent worrying, the moments of fear and courage, the bond that had grown stronger than he had imagined possible. Finally, he nodded. "Then let's make it official," he said. "Emma is part of this family, and this ranch is her home." Tears welled in the mother's eyes, and Emma threw herself into his arms, hugging him tightly. For Mark, that embrace carried the culmination of every struggle, every act of courage, every night spent in uncertainty. It was the promise of tomorrow, the affirmation of hope, and the quiet joy of having found family again. Life at the ranch continued, now richer and fuller than ever. Mark, Emma, and her mother moved forward together, facing challenges, celebrating victories, and cherishing each small moment. The night that had begun in fear and desperation had given way to a future full of promise and love. And whenever the lanterns were lit, flickering in the night breeze, they were not just lights. They were symbols of trust, protection, courage, and the enduring power of human connection. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It had become a home, a sanctuary, and a testament to the extraordinary ways in which compassion and bravery could transform lives. Mark Harper had discovered that even the darkest night could lead to dawn, and that love, trust, and family could be found in the most unexpected places. The little girl who knocked at midnight had changed everything, not just for herself and her mother, but for Mark as well. And under the vast, starlit sky, they all knew, without doubt, that whatever the future held, they would face it together, as a family.